Hi there, this is Dennis Velco with OutBüro. You're listening to OutBüro Voices, where we have engaging and sometimes comical conversations with LGBTQ entrepreneurs, professionals, and community leaders. Today, we're so pleased to have Michael Stevens. He is hailing from the UK, and he kind of fits all three of those categories: professional, entrepreneur, and a community leader. And in the community leading space, he has started developing, and we'll let him give you all the details, but an organization focusing on mental health and wellness called Create Space. Thank you so much for joining us today, Michael.
Hi, Dennis. Thanks for having me.
Well, absolutely. Such a pleasure to chat with you again. And wanted to have you come on and share your story. Really like what you're doing. So could you give us at first a little bit of information as just a brief background, and kind of what led you up to focusing on this and doing this, and why you're so passionate about it?
Sure, no problem. So I guess it was a sequence of life-changing events that I feel like they led to this moment. I think I never pictured myself doing what I'm doing right now, and it's certainly very different to what I was doing for a large portion of my professional career. I actually started working in the media industry, in magazines and publishing, for some quite big British brands, ID Magazine, Vice Media, and then went into kind of fashion for Liberty and a brand called Ted Baker, which I think they have out there in the US, working as their kind of head of creative, and then ended up working in travel in the end as creative director for Virgin.
Oh, wow.
And that was kind of like the job that I always wanted. I was 30 years old. I'd got to the position that I thought was the peak of my career. I was earning the amount of money that I thought was what I wanted to earn by that age. And yeah, I think from Instagram, everything looked perfect. And
Let me stop there for a moment. One, that's very early in your life to feel, like you've hit your peak. I could say a little gay man joke there, but won't. Premature. But it's good that you felt that way. And you just indicated something of, yeah, everything looked great on Instagram, and that's quite, in my view, a bit of an epidemic, where people are putting on a bit of a facade. It's like, trying to catch up with the Joneses on a horrible batch of steroids, right? So it's always the appearance of projecting, but it really doesn't always reflect the reality of what your life really is.
No, well, the reality, no one wanted to know. Well, I thought no one wanted to know. I certainly didn't want to know the reality, which was inside I was crumbling and very kind of unsatisfied. And that really kind of came to a head when physically my body shut down and I ended up burning out. And I had to go to the doctors and understand what was happening to me. My neck had all spasmed up. And then after some kind of inquiry, there was a whole load of other symptoms along with that: eczema, insomnia, IBS. And I'd been self-medicating for some of those and just trying to brush it under the carpet, so to speak. And then it just kind of got too much and I had to take some time off. That was the first time I'd ever been forced to slow down. And what I realized was that I'd never prioritized my own health ahead of my career ambitions until that point. And even actually at that point, I was still kind of desperate to go into work, and I was still answering emails on the sly, even when I was kind of forced to take time off. And I realized that this was a bigger issue than probably what was presenting itself right there. And I knew that going back to work wouldn't solve this problem. I wouldn't be able to recover properly if I went back, just because I think the environment that I was in wasn't conducive to me recovering. I think I needed to fully take time off, not just turn my phone off for a couple of days, but I actually had to take probably a couple of months in total, and used all my savings that I'd worked really hard for. But thankfully I had savings, and I don't know what people do who don't have savings, because it really was a case of needing to rely upon my support network to get through that period. My mental health then kind of dipped once I kind of quit the job, because the job was actually what gave me purpose and gave me a sense of self. I'd constructed a whole life around my career, from friendship networks to where I was living and all the material possessions that I was used to buying, the activities that I was used to doing. Suddenly I was unable to do all of those things because I couldn't afford to, and I had to leave London, and suddenly I didn't even know who I was anymore and had to really figure that out.
Well, let me interject there. A couple of my buddies run a blog called Debt Free Guys. Check them out at debtfreeguys.com. And they had accumulated over $50,000 of credit card debt and so forth. And one of their sayings is, if you try to have that catching up with the Joneses, if you are constantly trying to do everything that all of your friends are doing, and or where they're living and what they're wearing and where they're going to dinners and so forth, is, it's kind of like being gay can be pretty damn expensive, right? I mean, because the heterosexual couples, kind of end up, in the house having a kid, and their life becomes very just about that. Where in the gay culture, as especially gay men, it's oh well, there's this, my friends are going to Ibiza, my friends are doing this, my friends are going here, and you kind of want to be a part of and go, and especially if you're single, no kids, etc. And so you kind of feel like you have the freedom to do it, but gosh darn it, it gets really expensive. So I can definitely see where that comes into play. And I think it's really great even that, I know you've gone through the personal and physical and mental kind of burden and weight of it. But, as we were talking before, I actually personally think it's beneficial that you experience that at such a young age, so that you kind of woke up to saying, oh, wait a minute, I need to reprioritize my life, and set what makes me happy, versus the facade, the Instagram facade of trying to appear as if you're leading some luxurious lifestyle that is just burning you out. So I commend you on that.
It was essentially one long expedition search for validation, which kind of was what my whole life was structured around, whether it was validation for work or for, I guess, the achievements. Yeah, so kind of searching for success was kind of what I was assuming was going to bring me happiness. So
let me clarify that. You were seeking validation for the definition of success of others versus the definition of success, your definition of success.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So how did that kind of transition into what you're doing now?
Well, I did a lot of research and reading while I took the time off, and there were some kind of key books that I'm sure most people have heard of, but I would really recommend if you haven't read them. Things like The Velvet Rage and also Straight Jacket by Matthew Todd. They were really kind of helpful to me to make sense of what was happening. I then went a bit further and started looking more into, I guess, the psychology of trauma, really, because what I found from doing some of that initial research was that actually there was a lot that I hadn't processed from growing up, and that had most likely influenced my beliefs and my behaviors as an adult. And yes, those probably served me at one point, but it clearly wasn't serving me anymore, because it had driven me to this place of exhaustion. So it was really it was a case of going through things with a fine tooth comb and working out what actually I wanted to keep, and what I could let go of. And
that's very important. So I'd like to pause for just a moment. And, in the LGBTQ community, because 97% of LGBTQ young people in primary schools and so forth experience homophobia at some level, whether that's direct bullying and harassment, or even if it's just overhearing, footballers making homophobic jokes, even though it might not be necessarily directed at them personally in that moment. They might be sitting in the lunchroom or something and they overhear it a table or two over. It still makes them feel unaccepted. And sometimes there's family issues, whether that be to culture or religion or so forth. And so as LGBTQ people, we have a much more difficult time kind of seeking ourselves, because there's so much still today, at the end of 2020, even in the developed countries as the United States and the UK, where you are, there's still a overwhelming amount of negative messaging. And of course, we might say today in 2020, but we are affected by, everyone is affected by all of the messaging that they received growing up, from an infant to a toddler to a young person to an adolescent to a teenager. All of those messagings come in and they do shape you. They do shape how you think about the world, how you see the world, and how you see yourself. And so often the LGBT community members, more often than not, have a negative perception of themselves because of that messaging, and often do kind of what you did. What I'm hearing you say is seeking validation from others, because they're trying to get that positive affirmation that they've lacked. And so I just wanted to kind of unpack that a little bit for our audience.
Yeah, I mean, I was born in '88, which was kind of at the height of Margaret Thatcher, when she passed that hideous regulation that, prohibited teachers from talking about homosexuality in schools. And at that time as well, there were adverts in newspapers offering gravestones for gay people.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And any kind of association with homosexuality was kind of linked to AIDS, and no wonder that there was kind of a lot of confusion at the time. And, like I said, I'm in the middle of the countryside. I don't particularly, sorry, that's my dog in the background. Hopefully someone, so, I mean, I recognized I was gay when I was about 4 years old. And I think that's when I started demonstrating behaviors that were seemingly, unacceptable, or at least I interpreted them that way, and started changing the way that I was behaving in order to retain that connection to my parents or to my friends in the end, actually. Yeah, it was, what followed that was, I think, I was still bullied pretty much my entire childhood, but yet I still strived to fit in and still changed things about myself in order to either hide or to appear more likable. And no wonder by the time, I reached 19, when I actually came out and was allowed to be authentic, I had no idea what authenticity meant, because all I'd ever been was what I thought other people wanted me to be. So, and then you start kind of having to try and fit in with a whole other community that you've just arrived, and everyone is also at that same point. So it's no wonder that it's a bit messy. Yeah.
That's a good term for it. I was thinking dysfunctional, but I like messy. Yeah, and I can totally relate. I can totally relate. A few years earlier, but I can totally relate. So, so now, kind of let's bring that into the create space, and
Yes.
tell us about that.
So initially, I wanted to, I guess, support others that were on the same career trajectory as I was, and equally kind of suffering in silence. That was kind of my initial aim. So I wanted to create I guess it was well-being experiences that lent themselves to not only taking care of your physical and mental health, but also kind of a networking opportunity. So it didn't feel as though, because I think there's a connotation with self-care, which is that you appear to be a bit lazy. Taking care of yourself feels like a nice thing to do, maybe when you don't have lots of other important things to do. But actually, what I was trying to promote was taking care of yourself will benefit your professional ambitions in the long run, because you'll be more creative, you'll be more productive, and also you're not going to burn out and then have to take time off. So it's more about playing the long game that I didn't play. That was kind of my initial ambition with Create Space. And it was kind of combining as well creativity with health and well-being, because creativity is such an amazing tool to use as well. There's kind of really amazing meditative and mindfulness qualities to it. So that was kind of how I started, and it was aimed more at a B2B audience. So I was going to be working with businesses, so almost kind of like taking their entire teams away, company offsites to a certain extent, but more with a well-being focus. So we had quite a few of those organized, my brother and I. So my brother's been organizing retreats for about 20 years. And unfortunately, COVID hit, and all of the physical retreats got cancelled.
Mm-hmm.
However, I was working on another project, which was more kind of using the techniques and the practices and the tools that I had acquired throughout my own personal journey. And it was almost putting something together for an LGBT audience based on what I had learned. So that kind of got me, I guess I had more time to work on that actually once COVID hit and I was at home and I wasn't able to do these physical experiences. So I had a team initially that was in mind, but they didn't feel comfortable delivering this online. So I had to kind of find a whole new team. And really it's a virtual retreat. And the reason why I call it a retreat is because it's made up of a sequence of complementary workshops. So it's over 2 days, which means that, there's a good enough portion of time that you can actually switch off and you can get really kind of into the content. It's not just an hour, webinar that you turn on and you passively kind of take in the information. This is quite an active, interactive workshop. So you're actually kind of engaging with not only the team members, but also the other participants as well. So there's a huge kind of peer-to-peer learning aspect. And the whole retreat is structured around identity. It's called Who Am I? And we explore how trauma has informed our identity, really, and how, I guess, all of the different layers that have built up to create who we are have kind of manifested today, and really kind of what's beneath them. So it's a lot of kind of unpicking. It's a lot of self-inquiry. We look at various aspects from relationships through to kind of sex. And like I said, identity is a huge part of it as well.
Well, you're definitely hitting on I think a key point, kind of getting back to earlier in the segment, talking about the Instagram facades and as we spoke to, all of that kind of information coming in, especially to everyone. So, I mean, this is not all unique to the LGBT. It's just the LGBT community typically experiences that to a more heightened degree.
Exactly.
And you're right. Most poor bastards don't know who the hell they are.
Yeah.
And most people going through life are just trying to figure it out on the go. Yeah. And I think this is why I really love what you're doing, because I'm huge believer in life coaches, mental well-being. I, for over a year, participated in group therapy, group sessions, individual sessions, and so forth. And getting to the point for me, for example, of, I personally now, I'd rather be single than be unhappy. Mm-hmm. So I'm not going to compromise myself any longer, just for the appearance of being in a relationship. Because as what this is getting to, you have to know yourself first. You have to, as I like to quote RuPaul, honey, if you can't love yourself, who's going to, or something.
Exactly.
To that. And so, and you're right, the self-care. One of our other group members who I'm will be doing a interview here shortly on as well is for example in caring for others when you have a disabled or an ill parent or someone just recovering from a hospital stay, and you are the caregiver of that person. You kind of get lost in, because you're caring for someone else. And so you can become overburdened. And it's similar in work. When you put all of your energy into the work to chase that someone else's idea of success, then that it's only about money and the vacations you go to and the places you eat and the zip code that you live in and so forth, you're ignoring yourself. And so I really love that you're helping people kind of refocus, help get in touch with themselves, and in doing so, define what that success is. And I think self-care, being truly happy with who you are and where you are, and from there having a foundation then to go. And
this is all rooted in research as well. So it's not just kind of my own kind of creation. This is based on lots of different experts and specialists have kind of come together to create this. So I think what's been shown in research is that the mental health kind of epidemic within the LGBTQ community is rooted in identity issues, and you've already kind of mentioned it today. It's that kind of I guess, lack of self-worth that we didn't acquire as children, because we assumed that we were not worthy, we were unacceptable as we were.
Right. Well, and that's why studies have shown your typical person who's LGBTQ is typically, if they're an employee, is typically the employee who will work 3 times harder to get ahead for that validation. And but it comes at a cost. Yes, they will achieve, some level of quote unquote success, but at what cost?
Mm-hmm.
And so
this is actually aimed at employees. This is aimed at businesses, to put their employees through their LGBT. I guess I'm calling them leaders and leaders with a probably lowercase L, so leaders at every level, because I do feel as though this work is needed by any leader. Otherwise, I don't think you can really lead authentically, because you're potentially leading from a place of ego. I think even those who are working within the third sector, it doesn't have to be kind of a profit-based company that you're working for you to work with ego. I think there's just, you have to understand your motivations before you can lead authentically.
I couldn't agree more. Absolutely. Well, cool. So, so how long have you been building Create Space, and where are you at now?
Well, we launched last year and we started doing the Who Am I program in June. We've put over 200 employees through the Who Am I program since then, virtually. And really one of the questions that came up after doing these retreats, because we've had some incredible reviews and reactions to it, was how do I continue to do this work? So for me, it was about thinking, how can I create a community on the back of this where people can support each other, and also keep learning new tools and learning more about themselves, really, because as you've pointed out, this is not kind of just a one-stop thing. This is kind of an ongoing process. So I mean, I have
absolutely, it's ongoing. I mean, when you think about all of those messagings that started out in your childhood, they're still possibly even being messaged to you right now.
Yeah.
I mean, I have family members who are right-wing evangelical, and I still get all of the, well, we love you, we just don't love your lifestyle or your sin. Frankly, fuck you and your religion that you're learned and it's your belief. I don't mean to disrespect anyone and their faith and so forth, but seriously, sometimes they want to say, like that particular person, well, you just can't seem to talk about much of anything other than the gays. It's like, okay, well, I'm gay at that point. My husband's gay. My child, it has 2 dads. Okay, now I'm divorced and so forth. But, and the business I'm starting is all for the LGBT community. Yes, I can talk about gardening, and I can talk about, repairing the roof or putting in new windows and things like that. But with those people, I'm thinking of a few, and especially one in particular, I had to come to a crux. So I'll share this with you. It was so negative, and it's my father. And I had to, a few Christmases ago, as I was getting ready to move down to Fort Lauderdale for the community. I like a larger city, larger community, lots of activities to do. And starting OutBüro, I wanted to be in an area that, I was part of the community, and where other LGBT organizations are based. And so as we're sitting, he was like, "Oh, well, I'm here. I hear you're moving south." I'm like, "Yes." He's like, "Why?" I'm like, "Well, because it's a much larger community," and gave a few things without. I cannot say anything the word gay, LGBT, or immediately goes into Bible scripture quoting.
Mm.
And so I just was using the word community because community. Well, what do you mean by that? I'm like, you know what the fuck I mean. So, but he loves to dig and pull until I have no other option but say it to give him the justification to go into a biblical evangelical tirade. So I just have learned through my own self-care, working with the groups who are also all veterans, by the way, US veterans, and working through that is I have had to learn how to love myself enough to put rules of engagement with others and boundaries. And so if anyone crosses those boundaries with me, they now, and I've experienced this, that's why I was saying kudos to you for getting to this point at your age, because it took me quite a while. I've had to learn, even with the people that close to me in my life, that you do not disrespect me. You do not, and I'm not going to disrespect you either. We're going to have rules of engagement, and I have boundaries. So if you cross those and continue to cross those after being corrected numerous times, you're jeopardizing a relationship with me, because I felt like I had to put up with it and had to tiptoe at my age. F no. I'm not tiptoeing for anybody any longer. I'm me. I love myself so much that I'm no longer going to put up with other people's learned bullshit. Yeah. And so we had it that day. And, it's unfortunate, but I got tired of constantly being the one to, kind of pull back and accept it. And so I think, and now not everyone is that drastic, but so it's very important, because everything can be, for an example, for everyone listening. I've used this example before, so it's worth repeating to hone in. So let's say your parent doesn't spend much time with you in helping you do your homework, helping you do your math timetables or something like that. And then you struggle with it as a child. Then you take a school test and maybe you get a C and your friends are getting B's and A's. Now what that does is it validates that, one, you're not worthy of your parents' time and attention to help you learn. And it doesn't even have to be a learning disability, just a general person, right? But then that's reinforced by the test that says, oh, well, I don't get the time for my parents to help me do this. Maybe my teachers haven't helped me. Now I'm getting validation. So I'm not worthy, plus I'm not smart. When in reality, it just needed time and attention that so many kids don't get to for a long time, not just today, but for a long time. So again, that's just there's so many reasons why I love what you do. So anyway, sorry to go off on that, but I really wanted folks to kind of hear that, because you can extrapolate that onto and overlay that onto almost anything in your life. And it doesn't have to be those big family clashing moments at a holiday. It's those little things throughout life that just get done, said, or not done, and not said. that can shape the way you think about yourself. And if that wasn't said enough or not, you know what I mean, not said or said, that was either negative. And sometimes negativity can come in the form of something not happening. And one of the other things too, that, you know, so many times people will focus on, you know, like the domestic violence, you know, the physical actions, you know, the hitting in the face, creating a black eye. But the words are equally, if not more damaging. Because especially when it happens over time, that gets something subtle. That's why I absolutely hate passive aggressive people. If you're passive aggressive, you have no space in my life, because what happens is they will, you know, make those subtle negative remarks and those, you know, not do things or so forth, or do things purposely to get a reaction. And it's all an underlying, really kind of, it's disturbing in my view. I'm the kind of person, if you're upset with me, tell me. If I'm upset with you, I will tell you. I'd much rather a very frank and honest conversation, deal with it and move on. And to me, that's healthy. And maybe that's also due to my work in group and individual therapy as well. But I think it's so important for people to understand that they have a foundational human right to feel happy and be happy with who they are and where they are. If if you're not living in the right zip code on the right street, who cares? I'd rather you be happy with no debt, zero debt, other than maybe a mortgage and a car payment, right? And your average bills. I would rather you be happy and successful in that than being miserable, seeking external validation that's completely meaningless, and be like my friends David and John were, over $50,000 in debt with nothing to show for it.
Yeah.
Sorry, I went on a small tangent.
It's okay. I mean, just to build on one of the points that you made, one of the people that trigger me the most, those triggers don't change, and it's quite hard to, well, it's pretty much impossible to change that person, but I've just had to change my reaction to it. And I think that's what growth I've seen personally is just, I no longer feel the need to react when that person so desperately wants me to. And that makes all the difference, I think, because actually you get over it a lot quicker then, because you don't give as much importance to it. Yeah, and energy, exactly. Saving that for myself now.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Because to reiterate that, you cannot change or control other people. And if you try to control other people, stop. You can only control yourself and what you allow. And additionally, having those boundaries. And if people try to hit those triggers and they know it, put up boundaries, put up rules, and if need be, pull away. It's okay. You know, it's better that you be happy and that they be miserable. And maybe you see them once a year, maybe once every 3 or 4 years, whatever has to happen. But they're the ones who cause it. And you just have to, you know, even if they're family members, you have to love and respect yourself enough to not put up with it and limit it.
Even if you can, I think, see that there's pain and sadness behind that person, you are still unable to change them. Unfortunately, that desire to help them, to care for them, to support them is, it's very real. But the most important thing to do is to look after yourself. And you are the most important person within your network. And actually, you're probably going to have a bigger impact on them by taking care of yourself. And then you're in a better place to support them. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you're reiterating what is being, even taught again for people who are caregivers for someone who is ill or something. As a caregiver, sometimes that person who is ill can be a little needy and a little ungrateful and sometimes abusive, physically or verbally abusive. We've experienced that in our family. And but you have to, you have to put those boundaries up, and you can actually, there's a well-known document. It is called Caregiver Rights. So if you even just Google that, folks, called Caregiver Rights, it talks about, your right to happiness, your right to private life, your right to, not be there 24/7 for that other person. But that also, again, why I'm bringing that up is because it's a thread, and it also goes into work. If you are caregiving for your work to a point where it is unhealthy and you're sacrificing yourself, that's no good either. To reiterate what you were saying, when you do pull back and you care for yourself, you learn about yourself. It doesn't even have to be a holiday, on some remote island, but just taking time out of your day, like right now. And for many years, I walk at minimum 4 miles a day. So I take an hour and a half every single day, and I walk. So now, granted, my mind is sometimes thinking about work, but what I find is while I'm on those walks, I will actually solve problems that when I come back to my home office, I have a different perspective. Because I had thought about it differently than while sitting at my laptop in the midst of the frustration, right? Of, oh my gosh, why isn't this and this working? But I go for my walk. I say, all right, just like now, I'm going for a walk when we're done with this, because when I come back, I have another conversation in 2 hours after. But that gives me a time to refresh. I'm getting a bit of exercise while I'm doing it. I'm getting fresh air while I'm doing it. I have a few dogs along the way that have got to know me, and I stop and pet them. And it's just a little bit of time to recharge. And so often people don't put that kind of a priority. And I don't have a set time that I do my walk. It can be in the morning, the midday, or the evening. But literally every single day I have to do it. And if I miss a day, I literally do double the next. And so those are those even little things that I think you're getting to is, and that's why I think your follow on, support, online support groups and so forth, networking groups, I think is great, because people can inspire others and, share what they do. I'm also a hobby artist. So when I'm in my own space, I need hours to do that because I lose time when I do it. But that's one of my other things that I do is it's creative. I lose time. So I have to have enough time block that I know that 6 hours to me will only seem like 1 hour. But
sounds like you would love to come on one of our retreats. That's exactly what we do. We just paint and walk.
Well, that sounds great. We'll have to make that happen in the future. Yeah. Well, so great. So I know we're hitting here on our time allotment. So is there any last words that you'd like to share with us, or thoughts?
Well, it's actually Men's Health Awareness Month this month. And I just did a talk yesterday. And I think one of the biggest realizations that came out of it was based on a study that was just done, and it was done in the UK, and it asked men in the UK, have you been asked how you're coping? And 45% said no, they hadn't been asked how they're coping during this pandemic. So I think just my last bit of advice, or my kind of request, is to just reach out to anyone and just ask them how they're doing, because I think often people do struggle in silence. I know that I certainly did. And that was kind of, that's how I'd like to end it.
All right, so let's up that challenge. So everyone out there, one, thank you for making it this far into this episode. What I'd like you to do, and what Mike would like you to do, is to go onto your contacts and reach out to 10 people. Right now, as soon as this is over, reach out to 10 people. Maybe you've known them for a long time. Maybe they're relatively new in your life. But reach out and ask, how are you doing? No, don't respond with just a simple great. I really want to know how you're doing. Let's have a call. Make that your challenge to accomplish this week during Men's Health Awareness. And they don't have to be gay, but family members, friends, new coworkers, whatever that is. Be authentic in your question, and then share how you're doing and ask how you can connect. Maybe ask to meet up for coffee. Make it a nice exchange. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. So much appreciated I so much appreciate what you're doing. I hope that you will at any point reach out when you have new activities or new benchmarks within your organization. Create space. We'll have links below, as well as I will link to those books that you mentioned. Think that that would be really great for people to see. I appreciate those book recommendations. And well, Michael, it's been such a pleasure chatting with you.
Oh, thank you so much. Loved it.
Awesome. And thank you again, everyone, for staying tuned. While you're here, if you're viewing this on YouTube, while here, be sure to hit that subscribe button and click that bell. What that bell does is, as new episodes are released when you're in YouTube, it will show up in your notifications. Also, if you would like to listen on the go, maybe while doing those self-care relaxing walks, or on the beach, or maybe just in 3-inch red pumps while vacuuming your house, you can listen to OutBüro Voices on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Stitcher, Apple, Google, and about 10 others. I'm Dennis Velco with OutBüro. Join the community today and interact with other LGBT professionals and entrepreneurs around the globe. Bye-bye.